Welcome to Beyond the Bar, a podcast where justice meets recovery. I'm Devon Anderson. I'm a former prosecutor, defense attorney, judge, elected DA, and current recovering alcoholic. I started this podcast because I believe that there should be no stigma around seeking help for substance use disorder and mental health issues. Right now, it's looked upon as a bad thing if you go to rehab. I feel like somebody should throw you a party if you're going to go. I just started AA. I'm completely into it. I started in October, met the best people there, people who are loud and proud about their recovery. And so I thought this podcast, if we talk honestly about recovery, might help some people. Also, I'm the executive director of Justice Forward, which is a nonprofit in Houston that helps people in treatment courts. And that's the help that's available for people who are in the criminal justice system. But a lot of people don't know about it, and they don't know how to get in them. So we're going to talk to people who are in those courts, who've graduated successfully from those programs. But we're also going to talk to people who run the courts. So that's kind of a reminder of what we're doing here. And I want to introduce my first guest, Judge Mike Fields, who is actually a really good friend of mine. We started at the DA's office together. He's been a county court judge for 20 years. He started the Misdemeanor Veterans Court. So I want to talk to him about that, of course, but also he is a man in recovery. And I've never heard his story. He heard my story last week at a big old AA meeting where I let it all hang out. I want him to share what you want to share, but I'm really interested to hear your story. Thanks for being on today.
Oh, this is a pleasure, Devon. Thank you for having me.
Yep, absolutely. So I don't know where you want to start, but I'd like to start with your story, and then maybe we can work into Veterans Court.
Sure. Our stories are a lot alike, except that they're completely different, right? I grew up in a family where my mom had a 6th or 8th grade education, depends on which day she's telling the story. My dad graduated from high school, and I think he had a semester of junior college before he joined the Air Force. And, he was an erstwhile musician. He went out to California. That didn't work out. And so I'm a military kid. I was an Air Force kid, and that's exactly what I wanted to do after I graduated from high school, was go into the military and just serve and do my 20 years like my brother had done. My sister joined the Army, and my mother had other plans. She was like, look, none of you guys has gone to college. You're, halfway smart. You're it, And so I went, and sure enough, graduated. I was going to join the military after college. But during I want to say that it was my sophomore year, freshman going to sophomore year, I was coming back from basic training, went out with some friends, had too much to drink, drove my car, got caught, and got a DWI.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I got a DWI. I was 18, and that changed everything.
Maybe we're not as good of friends as I thought.
Don't get me started, man. I'm trying to be serious.
Okay.
And so, I couldn't drive a cop car for 5 years. So policing was out. And I had really no idea what I was going to do.
Wait, did you get probation or what?
I got probation, but it was like a 2-year probation and lots of conditions. At least as I look back on it and I look at what we were doing,
yeah.
It was a tough probation. And so I did it. I did the full 2 years because it's the DWI, you have to. Mm-hmm. I did all of the community service and stuff. But with DWIs, unlike almost every other crime, they stay on your record forever. Yeah. You can't get them non-disclosed. You can't get them expunged at that time. And so that thing was just there like an albatross holding me in sort of a holding pattern. And I was lost. I didn't know what to do. And my mother suggested that I go to law school. And I thought, well, why not? I started working on my master's degree, and I took the LSAT just on a whim one weekend and did okay. Got into St. Mary's Law School, thank God, because it's the only one I applied to. I didn't know anything about the process, right? And then after that, I started with the Harris County DA's office in '91, which is where we met in 1992.
Right. Well, wait. I want to ask you this. Tell me where you went to undergrad? Did you
I went
say?
to undergrad at Texas State University. It was
Okay.
It was Southwest
yeah.
Texas State University then, and of course everyone, oh, the party school, the party school.
is.
It was, and I couldn't deny it because I had my own DWI to prove it, and so I had resentment about that. I was like, I went to the best college I could go to, or that I thought was the best, and now I'm hearing it's a party school. Well, the degree worked. You know what I mean?
Right.
I got a degree in criminal justice. I got a law degree, and I got on with what I think, honestly, was the best DA's office in the country, working for the greatest DA that has, I think, next to you, ever held the position, and that's Johnny Holmes.
Yeah, I want to ask, why did you become a prosecutor? Because I get the whole, your mom wants you to go to law school, because I wanted to be an actress.
Yeah.
And yet here I am. So my mom was like, no, you're going to law school. So I understand that. But what made you want to be a prosecutor?
Absolutely nothing. My dad had a heart attack, and I was going to go with an oil and gas company and be a landman because they had offered me big money at the time, which right now would be barely minimum wage. But I was going to go with them and live the life fantastic, and my dad had this heart issue, and I wanted to stay in Texas to be near him. And the Harris County DA's office was offering a job, so I took it. I remember Burt Graham's call right now. It rambled for 10 minutes. It felt like Burt is a guy who sends out the offers to everyone or calls everyone for the offers. And it was just the funniest thing. And I thought, okay, if I get to work with people like that every day, that's going to be fun. And I came to Houston, and I love this place. I love this city. I met some of my best friends ever, and we still talk. A lot of us still talk.
Yeah.
We still talk.
Yeah. We do. We do. It was fun. We were all 26. I started like 2 or 3 months after you, I think. You were pre-commit. I was not. I got hired after I passed the bar. And it was, I have already talked about on this podcast how much fun I had at the DA's office. I will only speak for myself. You can speak for yourself, but.
We had a lot of what we thought was fun at the time. On Wednesdays, everybody would pony up and get a pony cake.
Yes.
And that was right there at the office. It was a different time and a different drinking culture. And of course, that socializing, that interacting with other people at your level and above you, that's how we met the people who were our supervisors, was over cold beers and, wet whiskey. And that sense that you were a part of the crowd helped to promote you at the office, both interpersonally and literally. I believed at the time
Probably right.
that those, yes, your work product mattered, no question, but everybody was good. Everybody was really good. And
Being a lawyer. Yeah. They were.
really good lawyers, fantastic lawyers, and super smart people. And so, I got into it, left, went to the AG's office, eventually came back, did my own private practice, and ran for office. Some guys came to me and said, hey, we got some people on the bench that we would rather not have there. Would you be interested in running? And I wasn't thinking anything about politics, but I thought, sure.
What year was that?
This was 97.
Okay.
1997. And so I ran for office 97, 98, won in 98 in the primary. There was only one party winning at the time, and that was the Republican Party. And so I was a Republican. And I ran for office and won. And then there was essentially a 1-year waiting period before I took the bench in 99. The craziest time of my life.
Really?
Yeah. When people know you're going to be the guy, it turns into a, what's he going to do? Who does he think he is? All of this kind of fest. And it was not the most pleasant thing. I didn't get a chance. It didn't seem to me to just enjoy the blessing. And being a judge in Harris County or anywhere is a blessing. Took the bench in 99, and it was fun until it wasn't.
So talk about what kind of cases you had in front of you and.
Right. So we handled Class A and B misdemeanors in the county criminal courts. Now, as a criminal defense lawyer, I handled everything. But as a judge, I handled Class A and B misdemeanors, DWIs, possession of controlled substance, domestic violence, the things that for lack of a better term, your neighbors might find themselves involved in. Most of us don't have neighbors who are involved in aggravated robberies, murders, and kidnappings, but almost all of us has a friend or family member who's had a few too many at the bar or at a party and driven home and gotten caught. Especially in Texas, where there's absolutely no public transportation to speak of. I mean, obviously, we have a great metro system here, but for the most part, after a certain hour, you're not catching a bus or a subway or anything like that.
I feel like until Uber started, there was really no alternative but to drive your car home. That was my approach. That was,
Or catch a cab.
now there's no excuse to drive, in my opinion, because of Uber, if you can afford it.
But I did that, and I served. I enjoyed my service most of the time. When you're dealing with people whose crime is something that a lot of people commit and they don't see it as being that serious, they take offense when you're doing things to get them help. And a lot of what we see in misdemeanor court are people who need help but just refuse to get it. Because most folks, I think, have driven after having a couple of drinks and never had an encounter with the police.
Right.
Those who've had an encounter where they blew twice the legal limit, or they have a prior DWI, or they have a couple of priors. One was dismissed, another was given pretrial, and now they're on their third, and they're still saying, "Oh no, Judge, I don't think I have a drinking problem." Those are hard cases to deal with.
Right.
And they're very resentful of anyone offering them change.
Two things that come to mind. One, I know I heard that when you get arrested for DWI, you've really done it like 100 times before. There's some statistic about that where you're just chronically driving and you happen to get caught.
Yeah.
And I know that was the case with me. I drove a lot. The other thing I will say is that with felony DWIs, they're handled in the drug court mostly here.
Yeah.
And they started a new docket for those folks because they didn't belong in the criminal justice system. They didn't belong with all the drug users, They needed to be, and they are a different animal in the fact that they have cars, they have jobs, I'm not trying to stereotype. I'm saying that they're generally more affluent and more stable people, but they're stone cold alcoholics.
Right.
And they're breaking the law, and they don't think that they should be there. I just always have found that dynamic interesting.
And here's what I've come to think right now today at 10:25 a.m. And that is that's not a bad approach.
No.
But the guy who's smoking meth in a trap house or crack on a corner or snorting cocaine at a party is just the same as the alcoholic
they are.
with the
Yes.
job. And so why don't we try to use some sort of hybrid system that shunts those people out of criminal justice contact and into treatment with the option of jail time if they just can't get the message. But making hardened criminals out of addicts, Mike McSpadden said it a long time ago to anyone who would listen, this doesn't work. And we're finding that it's not working. We're creating a class of people who can't get a job, can't get housing, and can't get well.
Right, and I do say though the treatment courts work, but there aren't enough of them. Right. People don't they don't know about them. They're not promoted. We don't have enough of them, especially in Harris County, to have 4 drug courts, and that's what we started with in 2003, and we still just have 4 courts. Give me a break. So were you, while you were on the bench, were you drinking? You were drinking.
Yeah. Not like at the same time that I was on the bench. I didn't have a flask underneath there.
Yeah, no.
But no, I consumed alcohol for years. I started drinking when I was 15 or whatever. We would go to football games, Friday Night Lights, high school football. And all of the cool guys, right, they were drinking Lone Star beer, the national beer of Texas. And also the worst tasting stuff I've ever had in my life. No offense to Lone Star. This podcast takes no responsibility for the statements of the
we
guests.
agree with his views,
right?
Although I do.
Right. So that's what we would do, right? And we'd go to the drive-in theaters and shove ourselves in the trunk, next to beer, and that's how it was as a kid in a military rural community. But that stuff caught up. I thought I was managing fairly well. We talked earlier before this. I had a career. I was paying my bills. My family was doing okay. But it gets worse and worse and worse. And when you're a judge, it's an isolating job.
You're very alone.
Yeah, yeah. And what I found is you don't make any new friends when you're on the bench, right? All the friends you got, you already had, and everybody knew. You're like, well, what do they really want, right? The problem is, we were judges at the same time. We never got a chance to speak. You're doing political stuff. You got kids. Each of us is in our own silo,
Right.
and none of us is talking to one another. That is unhealthy
That's
for
true.
anybody, but especially a person whose job it is to be compassionate and understanding and help other people. And so it was okay. I was managing. I was beginning to isolate at home, drink and lay on the couch and watch TV and make crazy comments at the shows. But I was okay. And then the pandemic hit.
Oh, yeah.
I lost my job, as we all did in 2018, and the wheels sort of came off. I didn't realize how much I missed it until I didn't have it. I was floundering. The world had changed. When I took the bench, Devon, there was no such thing as a smartphone. Phones were just like the rest of us, stupid. And there was no iPhone. As someone recently joked, Al Gore had not yet invented the internet.
Yeah.
And when I came off the bench, people were using Zoom. I had no idea what Zoom was. I didn't know how to make a spreadsheet. Because someone did that for me, right?
I didn't know how either. I
No.
had to teach myself. Yeah.
No. Calendaring my own dates. You don't realize what a pampered baby you are, right? Until someone kicks you out of the crib.
Yeah.
And now, well, I'm not a toddler. I'm a 30-year-old, and I've been acting like a baby all this time in terms of how stuff gets done for me. And man, I got depressed. I didn't recognize it as depression. I recognized it as an opportunity to hang out with friends and drink. And I did. And it got to the point where it wasn't about hanging out with the friends. It was just about the drinking. And it got worse and worse until it got to the point where I realized I'm either going to have to get some help, or I'm going to lose my family. I'm going to lose more opportunities than I've thrown away already. And I'm going to lose my life, because I don't think anybody can maintain the level of drinking that almost everyone was doing post-pandemic, and continue to live. Not a long, happy life. And so I came into, I got into recovery. I didn't go into treatment. I got into the rooms, as we call them.
So wait, did you have like a moment, or did anything happen, or you just
Yes, something absolutely happened.
No, I got it.
Yeah, no, something happened.
From my husband.
Yeah, something happened, and it was, without going into the sharing in a general way, it was time for me to get help. For me, that has been a life changer. Not because of the not drinking, as crazy as this is going to sound, but because of the lifestyle that it promotes. Integrity, humility, willingness, love, right? Discipline, self-discipline, perseverance, spiritual awareness, service. That's a way to live that keeps you from wanting to drink or use a drug or find yourself in some seedy place having sex with some anonymous person. Because it wouldn't be an act of integrity. And so, it's not courageous for me to lie. It's not honest of me to lie to myself about my problems. And it's of no service to anyone if I'm driving like a maniac in traffic, God forgive me, I still kind of do, and flipping people off and getting pissed at my kids for, doing stuff that I didn't teach them they shouldn't do, and not doing stuff that I didn't teach them that they should. And so when I work through those things, when I work through that way of living, when I process all of the past resentments and hates and hurts and bullshit
Yeah.
that kept me churning, that hamster wheel turning in my head, and would invariably lead to a drink, right? I need to calm these thoughts down. When I process that stuff and get past it, I haven't even sworn off drinking. I just don't want to, and the thought doesn't cross my mind. Getting to a meeting does.
Mm-hmm.
Talking to a person who's in a similar program does. Those things help me. But platitudes and religiosity have
Right.
not, and still don't.
I'll tell you, I noticed, when we kind of reconnected after all the stuff, that you are a lot less angry.
Yeah.
I noticed that about people in the program. They're not angry people. They're not, even despite all the turmoil and all the craziness in the world, there's a peace about you that you did not have before. I really do notice that.
I appreciate you. I feel it, and someone told me it's unrecognized serenity. There's a prayer that we use a lot. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Yeah, I was angry as hell. I was angry because I wanted to be liked, and everything I was doing was gaining enemies, it felt like. Don't get me wrong, I have a lot of friends, and there were a lot of people who appreciated what I was doing. I did not focus on them.
Right.
Politicians are, as I used to joke, people who are insecure enough to need everyone's approval and arrogant enough to think they can get it. And so, you're out there running for office and doing all of this stuff and hail fellow, well met, and glad handing. And then someone can say the slightest thing. Hey, did you put on some weight? Oh, Jesus, I'm getting fat. Oh, my God, I really got to I've got a diet.
Mm-hmm.
It's nuts. Now someone can say, whew, you looking prosperous, brother. Eating well?
Nice way to say that.
Yeah, and I will say, yes, thank you. I can afford food. What a blessing. I'm doing okay.
Yes, yes.
It's a completely different way of looking at life, and I'm just getting started.
Right.
I'm only a few years in. There's more will be revealed, as they say.
Mm-hmm. So, I had talked about being a drug court judge and being completely in my addiction.
Yeah.
Drinking every night until intoxication, pretty much, through the whole time I was on the bench.
Mm-hmm.
And I have no idea whether I was a good drug court judge or not. And the irony of it, But I know that I want to hear about how you decided to start the Misdemeanor Veterans Court, kind of how that came about, and if your issue, which I don't know was bad or not at that time, if that had any impact on it, or...
That's a great question. I decided to start working with the Misdemeanor Veterans Court as a result of a good friend, Mark Carter, who had started the Felony Veterans Court and had done all of this work. And he said, Mike, man, you got to get with this Veterans Court deal. And we were the only two, I'm pretty sure we were the only two veterans on the bench at the time. And certainly I was the only one at the misdemeanor level.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've got a sister who's a disabled vet, a brother who is a disabled vet, and a dad who's a disabled vet. And family members who drink heavily. And so this was right up my alley. And I'd been doing all of this work with the Century Council, which is now the foundation for the advancement of alcohol responsibility. And so, I was all on board. I got something working with Veterans Court that I did not get as a new judge or even a seasoned judge by this time. And that is training on how to deal with addiction issues.
Right.
And when you're drinking yourself and you're putting yourself in the position of the person that's in front of you, which for me was often the case, in retrospect, I wonder at times, was I treating the people in front of me like I wish somebody would have treated me? Was I sending them to the treatment that I wish I would have gotten myself at the time? And that's a question that I'm sure will be answered by and by. You know, God and I'll talk about that later, I suppose. But I learned through the training that we get with treatment courts, and Mary Covington and a bunch of people were very integral in that process. So I really thank her. How to do the job. How to do the job in a way that is efficient and compassionate, but doesn't play around.
Right.
Best training I've ever gotten.
So how did people, like, what were the criteria to get into the court?
So you had to be an honorably discharged veteran. You had to have a service-related injury that caused PTSD or some sort of traumatic brain injury. The requirements were a lot more strict then than they are now. Pretty much now, as long as you're a vet, you
Really?
can get into veterans court.
Okay. And you're charged with a misdemeanor, or
And you're charged with a crime that, and sometimes it doesn't seem as though the crimes directly relate to substance use. But you know, as well as I do, there are a lot of crimes that don't necessarily seem domestic violence. They don't necessarily seem related to alcohol or drug use. But there are a lot of people, they don't beat their spouse every time they get drunk, but every time they beat their spouse, they had been drinking.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
There are so many people like that. And there's a lot of comorbidity out there, especially in the veterans community, with PTSD and mental health disorders. You know, mental health disorders and substance abuse. And so those comorbidities, as we call them, or as I've heard them called, can result in sort of a synergistic or snowball effect of problems that result from using the substance and having the underlying condition. But they didn't talk about that in new judges school.
No.
You know what I mean? They
Yeah.
gave us a big book and
Bye-bye.
You know, bye-bye.
Is there a story that stands out to you from your time as veterans court judge? Like a person or...
Oh, man. There's so many of them that stand out. There's one guy in particular. I went out to visit him in the substance abuse treatment facility. And he's just a neat kid. He's struggling with some self-identification issues. Really got caught up on meth. Former Marine. You know, a badass. But his personal issues, as I saw them, separated him from the traditional idea of what a Marine is, and his combat experience separated him from an ability to deal normally. And he may still be in veterans court. That kid, he's not a kid, probably 30, but he's a kid to me. That was the kind of person that I wanted to do the work for. But they all felt like family. It was weird.
Totally different vibe than regular court.
It is. From the DA's office to the treatment community, the probation department, the defense bar. All of us were in a room together, staffing cases, talking about individual defendants, and nobody was arguing with anyone.
Yep, I agree. That's the only part of being a judge I enjoyed.
Yeah.
Because you got to see the results of all the efforts of all the people helping. But I had a complete disconnect from my own problems, which is I still find fascinating and probably need to see a shrink about. But
You know, I think people in our profession learn to compartmentalize. You know, and by this profession I mean politicians generally, judges specifically. You bring yourself to the bench, but you try not to bring your problems. Some problems are so big you can't help but bring them.
Right.
You know, I remember a former president. I won't name any names. Bill Clinton. He was able to separate, it seemed, his personal from his public politics in a way that was bizarre. Yeah.
So what would you say to somebody who's kind of knows they have a problem, but they're scared to address it? I mean, what would you say to somebody like that?
If you know you have a problem, that's the first step in addressing it, right? Admitting that you have some level of powerlessness over whatever the substance or situation is. That's the first step.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's scary. Everybody in recovery, everybody doing the work of recovery has made that same step. You are not alone. Just find somebody who's in it and get in it. I wish I would have gotten that message at 30.
Me too.
You know, we were joking with each other earlier. You said, you know, we could have done so many different things if we had learned about this stuff sooner.
Yeah.
And I agree. I agree. I was, shit, man, I was competitive as hell. All of the stuff that I thought was success before,
Right.
working this program of recovery, it's not. That's the illusion. That's the crap they sell us. And by they, I mean it's the they in here.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
This old lady said at a meeting one time, and she'll seem a lot younger to me in about 10 more years. Alcoholics and addicts have a bullshit manufacturing plant in their heads. They make it on one side and buy it on the other. And I've bought a lot of my own bullshit
Yeah.
when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, on that note, thank you so much.
This has been fun. I hope
I'm
you can
glad.
find some parts where I'm not talking.
Yeah. No. I'm sure you helped some people today. So thank you
Hope so.
very much.
Thanks, Devon.
I appreciate it.
I can't stop smiling at you.
I know.
Yeah.
So let me close this out. I clearly not very smooth at this yet, but I do want to say that if you have any questions about treatment courts, how to get in them, what they are, then go to justiceforwardtx.org. We have a pretty comprehensive website on that. We also have a email and a phone number. So if you want some help, give us a call. And if you have any feedback on the show, as long as it's nice, my email address is beyondthebartx.org. I became an expert at not reading the comments, so be nice, but be constructive. Would love to have any ideas, any themes you want addressed, or people you think would be good guests. I'd appreciate it. So just remember, there is help out there, and you do not have to do this alone. Thanks for listening.